We all know that one of the most popular pieces of work that people like to create in the commercial space are fashion films. This genre is known for being able to push the limits of creativity through the form of just visuals. Some of my best works have come from this space, and it's something that pushes my creativity, technical problem-solving skills, and my passion for filmmaking. But how do you go creating one of these films, especially with limited to no budget? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that by going over the step-by-step process on how we created a fashion film for a local Toronto brand. The real answer to that question is that you really don't. This was a collaborative project invested by the director just to bring everything together. This project really started with the relationship between the brand owner and the director to create a campaign for an upcoming tracksuit line. The owner of the brand grew up in my hometown Scarborough, and he wanted to create a series of vignettes that highlighted the culture as well as iconic spots in Scarborough. Without really explaining anything, you can see how this project piqued my interest and really started to check off the boxes that I look for, especially when collaborating with others. Do I like the idea, and can I push it to something bigger? Does it make sense for my portfolio and my style, or is there someone better for the job? And does this project excite me? With all these boxes checked for the project, it made sense for me to get involved. But the funny thing is that this was originally just a photo project with the scenes built out for each location. This is where I got even more excited because I could start building out a visual storyline that would align with the photo campaign. But before we even get into that process, it's important to understand the visual language of the project and how to approach it. I feel like a big thing that people don't talk about is one of the most important skills as a cinematographer, being able to communicate on how a project will be executed. I like to sit down with the director first and get an idea of what they like and how I can bring my ideas to complement that style. Understanding a visual language for a project will make or break it, and a big inspiration for this project was the intro from Shaft made in 1971. This was both an edit and cinematography reference, but we wanted to make it more modern with the use of more wide-angle lenses. I can't stress enough how important this process is because it sets the tone for the entire production. And once you are aligned with a vision, it's so much more easier to execute on that. And speaking about that, the next thing that we're going to be moving into is the pre-production and planning into this project. As a cinematographer and editor of this project, I'm mainly going to be focusing on those aspects, not necessarily really diving into the creative as a director. Usually there is a storyboarding process and then you would move into shot listing. But for more simple projects like these, where the director and I are controlling the creative with input from the client, there really isn't a need. Usually there is an approval process going back and forth between the agency and client, and an idea gets skewed and taken so far from the original. This is why I love spec and collaborative work so much, because the director and client of this project trust my decisions and encourage me to be as creative as possible. In addition to a storyboard, you would have done a location scout, but the director and producer already did that for me and sent me a bunch of pictures so I could get a rough idea of what I was actually dealing with. It's funny because I'm preaching all this pre-production, but I didn't do a location scout for the last location, the diner. And this diner gave us the most issues when it came to this production. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video to see how we solve those problems. So this is my final shot list for the project, and this wouldn't be something technical that I would send to a client or agency job. Again, this is spec and collaborative work, so I can kind of dumb things down just to make it easy as possible for myself when somebody is looking at this, and digestible for really anybody who is stepping on set. But what I really like to do, and was really put us in advantage when we're working on any of our shots, or really shot listing, especially on set, is putting reference and images in our shot list. So we have a bunch of scenes that we're going to be going over. We have the driving, the parking scene, the basketball scene, which is seen here, and then the last one is T-Bones, which is the name of the diner. So you can kind of see two kind of things here. We have the references of the video portion, and then we have some photos that was used for the photo reference, as this was mainly a photo campaign project. So I didn't necessarily want to leave the photographer out of this, because I want him looking at the shot list as well and saying that, oh, this is not just time for me to do everything, but this is time for everything to get done. And then usually I like to have a set time. So 10 to 11, 11:30 to 2, and then lunch in between, and then when wrap looks like when we end at 6. So not a lot of shots on the day, but a lot of moving around and using a very light camera package, as well as just knowing exactly what shots we want to get. Again, this was a collaborative and spec piece, and the director and I knew other limitations of the project, so we were like, yeah, we only can get maybe 2 to 3 shots per location, and these are going to be 2 to 3 shot vignettes, which ended up each being 30 seconds. And that was more than enough. We were focusing on the story, the brand, and all of that, rather than really focusing on fast cuts or the cinematography. And then I have my reference, and then I have the shot description, so really anybody reading this can really dive into it and understand. And then the lens I want to use, the camera angle, the camera move, and then also the camera support, and then what we're shooting at, if talent is involved, if there is audio, and then if it's a VFX shot. So as I was looking to capture a bunch of the audio for the sound designer, all these shots are gonna have a Y in it just to say yes. And then all of them had talent in it, which was a Y again to say yes again. So I like to put all of these in little options so it's really easy to work, so I'm not copying and pasting and everything like that. And then in addition, if you actually look at the shot list compared to the final project, there is a lot of alts that I had as well, just to see if we could get different actor blocking. It wasn't necessarily alternative shots, but it was something different to see if the director wanted to go in that vision. Because me as the editor and cinematographer, I like to say that, oh, this will work and this really won't, because I can see how the edit will play out. But I like to encourage the director to have alternative ideas, and we do have time to shoot that. As a cinematographer, I never like to say no, but I'd say, let's see if we can do that and solve it in a creative manner. I love to put references in my shot list because it just allows me to briefly look at it on set, and I know exactly what I need to do for framing and camera movement. It also helps everyone on set because they can follow along easily. I feel like in this creative field, people like to see things visually rather than reading things on a piece of paper. And my favorite method of finding stills and references for my shot lists, as well as creative decks, is Frameset. Frameset is a collection of music videos, commercials, and films that allows you to find the exact reference for your project. When it comes to the pre-production process, especially when I'm creating creative decks as well as shot listing, Frameset is my go-to tool just because of how detailed their search engine is. For example, if we are creating the shot list for the basketball scene where I'm supposed to be looking through the car window, I am literally only going to type that because I want to basically build a frame within a frame, and my first example does that perfectly. Or if we get some human aspect involved, this is an amazing tool to use. And then if I want more shots like this because I'm not necessarily finding anything really that I'm looking for, I am going to use this function here, which is a similar search, and already have 10 references that are perfectly aligned for what I'm looking for in this scene. If you guys want to learn more about Frameset and want to integrate it into your workflow, check out the link in the description below. With our shot list locked in and everybody excited about the project, it was time to execute on everything that we planned on. As this was a spec project, we were pretty limited on equipment, and I had to use a lot of resources that Tenfold and I owned. The camera that we shot this on was the combination of the Sony Venice as well as the FX3, which I personally own. These cameras match perfectly, and they really complement my filmmaking and cinematography style. We used a combination of lenses, which were the Laowa 12mm for all the wide angle shots, the Leica Rs, and a Sony 70-300 E-mount lens. I would love to have a cinema zoom on this project, but because it was only for one shot, I knew I could get away with just using a stills lens. And we were shooting in the middle of the day, and I'd rather reach a focal length of 300 in a small package than slightly better quality with cinema glass. The funny thing about this lens is that it is E-mount and compatible with the Sony Venice, but I couldn't control the aperture as well as autofocus, and that's exactly why I used the Sony FX3. As a lot of these scenes that we were shooting outdoors, I knew that I wouldn't be able to light much, or really need any lights. So I just decided to bring my Titan tube kit because it is the most versatile when it comes to narrative projects like this. I am so glad that I brought these tubes because it saved one of the scenes that we almost scrapped. You'll see later on in the video. And the last thing was a ladder in combination with a hi-hat, apple boxes, and some ratchet straps so we can get all the high angle shots. Honestly, this entire project could have been shot on the Sony FX3, but I have access to the Venice, and with its native 3:2 aspect ratio, this is perfect for projects like this when I'm trying to create moving portraits. It doesn't matter the scale, any production day can feel intimidating and extremely stressful. This doesn't go away for me until I have picture up on the first scene and the schedule is being met. For this project, we didn't shoot anything in order, but what made sense to do for time of day, travel times, and shot complexity in terms of logistics. I like to start off with time of day as well as shot complexity so I can be as efficient as possible on the production. This entire project was shot in one day, and the only reason we were able to pull that off was due to proper planning and sticking to a concrete shot list. Before we get into the production, let's talk about scheduling and breaking this project up into individual scenes. The garage scene of the talent entering the car, the second garage scene where the talent is leaving with an additional exterior shot, the parking lot basketball scene, and the diner scene. Automatically, I knew that the diner scene was going to be shot at blue hour or into the night, so that's what I would end with. The basketball scene was going to be in the best time of the day, which was going to be late day as the sun started to get lower in the sky. The garage could be shot any time of the day. This meant I would plan to shoot this when the sun was the worst to shoot in, which is at noon. Lastly, the exterior shot of the car driving, and this was the most complex to deal with, so that's where we're going to start. We started our day at 9:30 a.m. and hiked into a local trail to get a vantage point where the car would be driving by. We scheduled about 1 hour to get this shot because I knew how long it was going to take to get in and out of those places, especially when a scout wasn't involved. Luckily, the director checked out the location earlier and he found a spot where we could see the road clearly. We brought a ladder and the Sony FX3 set up with a 70-300mm lens. Our assistant director was in communication with the driver and had him drive up and down the hill so we could get takes that we were looking for. Nothing too exciting here, and this is when you know a production is going well. No one was rushing and everything is going according to plan. The next location was another story because we were dealing with a parking garage that we didn't have permits for and other people in the building were going to be using it. As soon as we got on location and parked our cars as well as the picture car, the property manager tried to shut everything down. I am not one for confrontation, but the client and producer of the project talk things out. And the best thing to do in any of those situations is not to panic. I had my team set up the camera and started off with a wide angle of the scene. I was really happy with the composition, but not being able to control the lights was really bothering me. Luckily, I had an Apple box in my car and I reached inside the fluorescent fixtures and twisted the bulbs out. I did this for the lights that were on the edges of frame so it would isolate the center and bring some interest back into the shot. From there, we moved on to getting the shots in both scenes, and due to our planning, everything moved along very smoothly. One of the unique things that I like to add to my cinematography style is adding high vantage point shots with telephoto as well as wide lenses. The way I like to do this is by bringing an adjustable ladder to almost every one of our productions, which was the starting shot of our next scene. This one was pretty simple as we only had to set up for 2 shots, but we got there at the perfect time as the sun started to set in the background, which made everything in the scene really come together. We then broke for lunch and we had it at the diner that we were going to be shooting at next, as logistically this just made sense. Moving into the last scene is one of my favorite parts of the production because you can just feel the energy in the air. Everybody is getting along, the vision is being executed, and everybody can ultimately see that vision come to life. This feeling is great, but it can be easily derailed by things that you never planned for. This last scene was the one that I was most excited about due to the iconic Scarborough location, and I had a very cool shot idea to show off the diner in its best light. My plan was to place the camera on a ladder next to the big neon sign to have the most interest while showing off the diner in the background. As soon as we spoke to the owner, he said that the sign hasn't been working for years. Now, there's 2 things that you can do in a situation like this. You can get in a panic and completely derail the project, or you can pivot and really work with what you have. And the second option is exactly what I did. I set up the camera on the corner of the building with a 12mm lens and played into a symmetrical frame rather than what I planned on. This worked, but I looked at the image and I noticed something was missing. We looked under the red signs all around the building and noticed that 75% of the lights were out. Again, I could panic or I could pivot, and that's where I asked my assistant director if I could have 10 minutes to figure out a solution. Looking under the signs, I noticed that there were a lot of areas I could simply just lean tube lights. So I asked my crew to set all the Titan tubes to 5000 Kelvin and at 80%, and place them the best they could inside the spaces between the roof and the sign pointing up so we could really pop out the red in the sign. This worked perfectly and really added a lot of interest to the shot. We went through a bunch of options and it was really cool to see people enjoying meals inside the diner while we were shooting this scene. But that was a wrap on a fun, simple fashion commercial that we shot in a place where I grew up. There are 2 big lessons that I learned from this, and one is not panicking, and 2 is working with what you got, which is kind of the last thing that we talked about. But working with what you got really goes into everything when you are looking at what cameras, lenses, or lights that you owned. This was a project that was very collaborative, and we're using a lot of the gear that we personally own while renting some things in terms of just lenses. But when I'm looking at specifically getting certain shots with zooms or getting high angles, I'm going to be looking around myself and really working with what I have when it really comes to it. I like to simplify things into a system that works for me and really isn't the standard when it comes to filmmaking. A lot of people really get caught up into the gear aspects of things, and when properly executing shots, you have to do everything by the book. But it's not really about that. Obviously, you have to do things safely, but for example, getting high angle shots, a lot of people do them on ladders with hi-hats. It's exactly what I did. But that is a lot of gear to carry around. If you really wanted to do this, I could do this on a Sony FX3, attach it to a C-stand arm, and really put it high in the air, obviously safely with sandbags and unneeded equipment and somebody always being on the stand, and just adjusting the shot as we go. There's just a lot of things that you have to understand when trying to execute shots, and you can execute them on really any price level. You just have to really work with what you got. And going into the second thing that I want to talk about is not panicking on set and really diving deep into the technical problem solving skills. This is something that you will learn with experience, and this can be seen as, oh, that's unfortunate because I don't have experience. But the best things that I've learned on all the productions that I have made time for myself, not necessarily that I've been getting paid for, and I like to call these technical specs. So this is me sitting down in an area like this and figuring out how I can even light it the best. That is a technical spec to me because I know that I will use that information later on in my career. And when it comes to spec work like this, I like to test things, I like to push boundaries so I can get those technical problem solving skills. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, let us know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.